Okay, I see a quorum. This meeting is officially called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. You may be seated. The recording secretary, please take roll call.
Vice Chair Sierra,
Here.
Commissioner Oliva,
Here.
Commissioner Garcia,
Here.
Chairperson Cha, Commissioner Oliver.
Here.
Thank you. We have four.
This is a time for the Commission to consider matters under consent calendar. Items include on number 1 and 2. Do any members have any corrections to the minutes, items they wish to pull for separate discussion or abstain on? Do I have a motion to consider items 1 and 2?
I motion.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say no. Matter approved by unanimous consent. We have one work study session. Please note that there will be no motion or action taken on this item. This item is the study session calendar. It's Arts and Culture Commission powers, duties, and responsibilities training. Our speaker is Mr. Ryan Hodge. This is the City Attorney's Office.
That's on. I probably don't need this. We're close enough. There's not too many people here, but just in case. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Ryan Hodge, Assistant City Attorney, and I am here to give you a presentation on your duties, powers, and responsibilities as Commissioners of the Arts and Culture Commission. Starting off, essentially, we're going to go over some of the authority and duties that you have as Commissioners under this Commission. The meeting procedures, which are governed by the Brown Act, which is a state code that regulates how meetings have to be conducted by public entities. Also, your bylaws, the Commission has a set of bylaws that are kind of like the ground rules for how the meetings will be conducted. We'll also get into a little bit of legal, ethical considerations of Commission, and then also talk about how we will implement best practices for running the meetings. As Commissioners, you have a bit of a high profile in the community, and we want you to recognize that. We also, it's an important point to understand that as Arts and Culture Commissioners, you are recommending policy versus making policy, which is what the City Council does. So your position here is to kind of go through all those issues and considerations and with your expertise in the arts to be able to recommend those things up to the City Council. And then you also need to understand that the Council needs that input, but they might not necessarily agree with you. That will happen sometimes. It does not mean you're not doing a good job or not doing something right. They just have to weigh and balance a lot of different ideas, so it might not always be what you recommend. So starting from the beginning, it was Ordinance NS 2856, a little over five and a half years ago now, that created this commission. There was a whole article added to the municipal code, section 2-550 established specifically the Arts and Culture Commission. 2-551 established that it would be a 7-member commission, and that each commissioner would have expertise in visual, performing, or literary arts, architecture, design, or urban planning, education, history, science, film, or arts and culture institution management. It's obviously a wide range of issues there, and it's that kind of experience that really creates a great commission, that you all bring in so many different ideas and perspectives that really help with analyzing the issues that come before you. 2-553 establishes the powers and duties of the commission and the commissioners. As I referenced before, it's an advisory body to the city manager and the city council regarding any kind of arts and culture activities in the city, economic development through the arts, celebrations of cultural heritage of the city, public arts projects, and city art acquisitions. We don't necessarily see all of those things all the time, but certainly some of those are very prevalent in this commission. It's also very important for the commission to advocate for arts education, cultural diversity. The Sister Cities program, which has gone dormant for a bit here, but it is still listed in the municipal code. And any other initiatives that further the growth and sustainability of the arts and cultural community in Santa Ana. And then, of course, there's the catch-all, such other powers and duties as may be appropriate to carry out these goals as set forth by the city council. So again, you're the advisory board for what the city council wants, so they can always, take a project or take an issue and ask the commission to look further into it or to make a recommendation on it. And then, as well as considering matters referred by the city manager. Again, also referenced before the bylaws. This commission does have a set of bylaws. Pretty black and white rules for how the meetings will be run. It talks about the time of the meetings, the days of the meetings, very specific issues like that. So, kind of sets up the ground rules for our meetings here. But as I'm sure you've all noticed, these are much more informal meetings than you see at city council level. They're very strict on certain things. We try to create much more of a discussion environment here, so that it's more free flow of ideas in this. So our bylaws, while they have pretty strict rules, we try not to get bogged down by any of that. Again, the article that references the commissions, the elections, the meetings, and then the conduct during the hearings. And the conduct during the hearings, that's really, kind of getting into best practices of how everyone should act here. This is not anything that's a problem with this commission. You guys have all been great. You're very respectful to each other. I'm sat on other commissions where it's, kind of been a struggle at times. But this commission here, I feel like I can skip right over all of that stuff because you guys, you're very respectful and courteous to each other. Now, one thing to understand here is that as arts and culture commissioners, you are public officials. You certainly still are individuals with your own rights, but as public officials, you do represent the city of Santa Ana. As you're weighing and balancing the issues that come before you here, you have to take that, it's a hard balancing act, but you kind of take that approach of what's best for the city, and you're representing the city, not necessarily your own personal interest, when you're considering those issues. Getting back to that commissioner communication procedures, when to approach staff and who do you ask and when if you have any questions. Tram's here, Bianca's here, Mark will be here, I'm here available. Please ask any questions at any time, middle of the meeting, before the meeting, anytime. We're here to help out and answer any questions you may have. It's preferable to provide any questions you may have about the agenda prior to the meeting, just to give us an opportunity to, if we don't have the answer right off the top of our head, we can kind of dig into it and look it up and get that answer for you so that you can use that information during the discussion at the meeting. Let's see. Speaking of during the meeting, we ask that everyone gets their opportunity to speak. We don't want any one commissioner kind of taking over a meeting and kind of going on a lecture or kind of preventing anyone else from speaking. Once again, this commission has been fantastic, with that. Everyone gets their opportunity to speak and very courteous to each other. All the members have equal rights, of course, and just as a courtesy matter, just while one commissioner is speaking, try to not have side conversations going on. It helps us to be able to listen to whoever's speaking. It helps the audience. It helps everyone just to be able to focus, and creates that kind of environment that everyone's involved in the conversation, rather than some information possibly going on the side that people aren't privy to. Relationships with staff. Again, the city staff works with the commission, but please do respect that the staff is accountable to the city manager and takes direction from their director, Stephen, who's just here, and then ultimately to the city manager. So while staff is here to assist you with any questions you have and to provide you with anything you may need, really they get the direction from the city manager. So it's not necessarily within the commission's authority to tell staff to prepare certain things, such as an amendment to the code or a grant application. That really comes from the city manager down, and then the staff kind of prepares that, and then it's presented to the commission to kind of review that work product. And then let's see. Such recommendations should be shared with the council. Oh, okay. If you have some kind of recommendation that you would like to see staff do something or prepare, say an ordinance amendment, it's best to share that with your council member who appointed you, because that's where kind of ordinances end up being approved, and so then they can kind of take that to the city manager, and then it can kind of come full circle from the city manager, be a direction to staff to kind of prepare that, then we would come back to you for review, and all the way back up to complete the circle to city council to approve an ordinance, if that's what is being recommended. Let's see, once again, I apologize for repeating myself, but they're really trying to hammer down the point here that Arts and Culture Commission acts in an advisory role. Meaning that you make recommendations to city council, but at the end of the day, the city council has the final say, and they're the ones who make the final approval of, say, the grant agreements. You go through that process, you review all those, you pick, the winners. That's a recommendation up to city council, and I don't know if we've seen it out of this commission. They usually, accept all those recommendations, but for example, CDBG, that goes through the Community Redevelopment and Housing Commission. They go through a similar process where they review all these different applicants, and then they select a certain few to recommend up to City Council. I know City Council has taken those recommendations and shuffled them before. And so at the end of the day, it's City Council's decision on how to approve those. Let's see, this kind of switching gears a little bit, getting into kind of a new area of law, social media. Obviously, social media has been around for a while now, but the law is very slow to catch up on these things, so we're just starting to get some direction on that front. The City of Santa Ana has prime interest and expectation in deciding what is spoken through social media on behalf of the city. But again, you are public officials in this capacity as commissioner, and so when you post things to social media, you are a representative of the city. And so you have to be very careful, and it's not a clear line. You don't completely give up your personal life, of course, and you have your personal social media, that's understandable. But when you post anything that talks about your role here in Arts and Culture Commission, kind of shift gears into that representative of the city role. And so that with that comes certain kind of rules and regulations with it. I just had a webinar training on that this week. There are certain First Amendment rights that people have in social media, and if you are serving in a role as a city representative, you kind of have to take that role as the city, where if you post something and somebody maybe responds back to it and you don't agree with it, you can't just delete their post or block them necessarily. I know this is a big case right now. You see it on the federal level. The president has a case with his Twitter account, I believe it is, that's going through the courts and they're arguing back and forth whether that is government account or whether it's his personal account. And so I think ultimately it's still being appealed, but the initial court determined that since he is kind of interacting and his messages are about the government and what his role is and what he's doing there, he's put the title of president on his Twitter account. They said that is a government account essentially, and all those same rules of the government would apply to him. And so when he tries to block people and whatnot, he's not allowed to do that because people have a First Amendment speech right, to interact in a public forum. But again, that is still up on appeal, so who knows where that will necessarily end up.
I think that actually generates more questions than clarity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in regards to your comments about our commissioner's use of social media.
Yes.
Right, so I understand acting in a public capacity, and the argument comes up, what if your Facebook is like totally private, blah, 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 and you have a separate public Facebook, profile, you want to delete, bad people or bad comments. Being an attorney, is this my own personal private page that I can cultivate, that I, if I don't like certain language, that I can block it. But it is, I guess, at the end of the day, something to be mindful of.
Absolutely. And I don't mean to tell you that because you sit on this board here that all of a sudden everything you do on social media, everything is now public forum. You are still private citizens. You still have your private rights as well. So it's how you use your accounts. I mean, your private Facebook account, you're doing whatever you do on that is fine, and you can run it how you want. It's just if you use it and just start predominantly using it as, hey, we're talking about Arts and Commission meeting stuff, and we had this happen today and that, and it's all related to the Arts and Culture Commission, then you have to kind of be cognizant of, you might be entering into that public forum representing the city kind of role. And so you have to be more careful if you then start interacting with people and want to possibly delete any comments or mute them. That could be a problem.
I think the general rule of thumb is just, assume that it's going to be seen.
Absolutely.
And just be mindful. So if you have no problem with your online behavior, and you're proud and own it, that's great. But sometimes there are things that even I say, I'm like, oh, I should delete that.
Fair enough.
But,
Fair
yeah,
enough.
thank
Yes.
you. Thank you. For that.
So let's see. So we've got that. So now switching back into the more technical rules of the Brown Act, we start off with, what is a meeting? A meeting is any gathering of a majority of the members of a commission or council or any governing body to hear or discuss any item of city business or potential city business. As you know, that requires notice, an agenda, and a time for public comment. So as you guys get our agendas each meeting, you see that we have specific areas in the agenda for the public comments. You receive a copy of it. That agenda is also posted right outside City Council chambers here, and then also posted online. That's all required under the Brown Act. So unless there is an exception, which are certain exceptions to when a majority gets together, where you can and the Brown Act won't apply. But otherwise, if there's a majority of you in place, and with a 7-member commission, that means that 4 of you are together, that would technically constitute a meeting that would require notice, and there's a certain amount of time, it's 72 hours notice, unless it's a special meeting. There's pages and pages of technical rules to it, but generally 72 hours of notice before the meeting, posting of the agenda, and then only discussing the items that are on the agenda. It's important to note too, it's not just these face-to-face gatherings. You can also technically create a meeting if you are communicating electronically. If you're speaking on the phone, you know, if all of you get on a conference call together, if there's 4 of you on a conference call, that would be a meeting at that point. So it's not just when we meet here. It can be any way you guys could possibly communicate or get together. That also, emails and texts as well. So it doesn't even have to be that live communication. So if you email, you know, 4 of you on the same email, that would technically be a Brown Act violation. So try to avoid those things, really, man. I'm sure you are all friendly, and I don't mean to, you know, separate you at all, but if you're not at the meeting or at a notice meeting, maybe not all get together at the same time would probably be a good idea. So meetings are required to be open and public. That's the whole purpose of this. So that's why the Brown Act requires any kind of government business to be conducted at an open and public meeting. Applies to local agency, city council, or commissions. The commission, or any board that's created by a formal action of the city council, which, referring back to the ordinance, this commission was created by action of the city council. So you do apply here. One of a few different exceptions, but the Brown Act does not technically apply to ad hoc, meaning this is a little bit of an error here, because it does apply to standing committees, but it does not apply to ad hoc committees. And so, because they have less than a quorum, but this slide here will kind of just make that distinction. So we kind of talked in this commission before, and I don't remember if all of you were here, but we had a discussion on ad hoc and standing committees. I believe it was towards the end of last year or in the fall of last year. And so standing committees are essentially kind of side committees of the commission that meet it'll just kind of be a general group of issues. I guess the best way to explain it is by example with the city council, how they have standing committees of like EDIBIT, which is the Economic Development, Infrastructure, Budget, and Technology Committee. And so that is a standing meeting of 3 of the council members. So they're less than a quorum, but since it's a standing group and they don't have a necessarily specific item that they're discussing, they are subject to the Brown Act. So you'll notice that those subcommittee meetings will be noticed meetings with agendas, and they have to follow the rules of the Brown Act. So similarly, but different, ad hoc committees are also kind of a side group of the commission that's less than a quorum, so it'll be 3 or less people, but they will be kind of formed to study a specific task or issue. So if there's one exact thing, and I think here when we tried to start up an ad hoc committee, it was to discuss.
I think it's a mural ordinance.
Was it the mural? Okay.
Or mural policy.
Yeah. So that.
Right, yeah, I think so.
So that's a great example of how it's one specific issue. So the group gets together to kind of go over and discuss the ideas and follow that through to a completion. And so then when you get to that end date where you have either the ordinances in place or it just expires out, that ad hoc committee is then done. So because it's a limited amount of time, limited in scope, the Brown Act does not apply to that committee. So it's much easier to work with. You can get 3 people on the commission together without having to notice the meetings or anything. So that's the distinction there between those 2.
Can we
Go.
have questions now?
Yeah,
or-
please. Yeah, fire away at questions anytime.
For the ad hoc committee, who determines that amount of time? Because it's a limited time, so who determines that?
So it depends on the issue that's being studied. So really, it's supposed to be driven by whatever the issue is. So if you have an ordinance you want to put together, you want to put a limited amount of time on that. It takes 6 months or something to where you can get that in place, back to staff, and can move it forward. So it really, there's no that I'm aware of, there's no it has to be no more than 1 year or anything like that. It's really driven by the issue.
So let's say they said 6 months from now.
Yeah.
And then 6 months comes and goes and there's nothing. Does it automatically dissolve that?
If it was set up by saying it will be for 6 months, then it would be dissolved at that 6-month date. And then you would need to come back and have the commission kind of reappoint the ad hoc committee or take some action to have it continue.
Okay.
I know why you're asking those questions.
Right?
So does Rosetta.
Right?
Yeah, it does. Commissioner
That's
Garcia.
good to know, yeah.
Yeah. So
So
I know
it's-
the ad hoc committee that came up, it would have expired on its term, because I remember with that one, we did put a time
I
limit
wanna
on
say
it.
it was about October?
October,
Or when-
yeah,
it was
last
Yeah.
October.
last year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, but you can always bring it back if there's, further need to discuss the issue. So one of the big Brown Act exceptions, of course, is individual contact. Act does not apply to individual contacts between a member of the body and any other person. So you can be talking to anyone outside the meetings about some of the issues here, talk to staff, talk to whoever. If it's just you or less than a quorum of the board discussing it, the Brown Act is not implicated. But where you can potentially get yourself in trouble is that individual contacts cannot be used to do in stages what would be prohibited in one step. Essentially the concept of the serial meeting. Serial meetings are essentially when, okay, you start off with, I'm talking with one commissioner, and then they talk to another commissioner, and they talk to, and by the time you get all the way around to it, everyone knows what everyone thinks on a certain item. That's I believe they refer to it as the daisy chain model. And then there's also the wheel or hub and spoke model where I'm gonna contact one commissioner, then another commissioner, another commissioner, and then I know where everyone stands, and then I know where I stand. So all of a sudden I know, and I've spoken with a majority of people. That's a Brown Act violation. I've essentially created a meeting because I know where a majority of the people stand on an issue. So that's why it's best to steer clear of just talking about any of these issues that would come before the board with any other commissioners. Because even if you're counting them, you're like, oh, there's only 3 of us here. It just takes one of you talking to one of the other people to then all of a sudden make it, you cross that 4-person barrier. You now have a quorum in your serial meeting, and that's a Brown Act violation. Let's see here. I think I just kind of gave a general overview. Yeah, it's the daisy chain and the hub and spoke. So avoiding serial. So the best ways to avoid the serial meetings is to direct contacts about city business with fellow members. That's the clearest way for serial meetings to occur. If you have questions or want to discuss the issues, direct them to staff. Instead of talking to each other through them or through the issues, communicate with staff. Staff can also run into those same problems, so we have to be very careful as well. But we are allowed, because we're not one of the commissioners, we're allowed to talk to everyone. We just can't share other commissioners' opinions or where they stand on things with other commissioners. And so that's how we avoid it, but that means that each one of you individually can talk to staff about any questions or issues you have with a particular item. Let's see. All right, so communications with staff. Yeah, we've discussed this. So let's see. Okay, here's a list of some other Brown Act exceptions, meaning that the Brown Act will not apply here. If you go to a seminar or a conference that's open to the public and of general interest, all of you can go and be there then, and that would not be considered a violation or a meeting. Community meetings that are open and publicized. I know we will have events sometimes where we're doing an opening of something or a new art exhibit. All of you can be there at that. Meetings of other legislative bodies, if all of you show up to the city council meeting, that's perfectly acceptable. Social or ceremonial occasions, I mean, you could just be at a holiday party or something and you can all be there. That's all perfectly fine, will not mean that the Brown Act applies. However, the caveat is to all of this is that if you are there with all of you present, you cannot discuss any of the items that would be coming before the commission. So you can all be there, you can be chatting about the weather or, you know, the Angels game or something, whatever you want to talk about. Just don't talk about the arts and culture stuff, because that's when all of a sudden it becomes an official meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have a final community listening session this Friday, but the last 2 sessions ago, I believe 4 of the commissioners showed up, you know, which is great,
Mhm.
but then what happens in that instance? So that's a city-led meeting,
Mm-hmm.
in a public forum that was publicly, you know, publicized, the community's welcome to come,
Right.
obviously.
Yeah, and so I think that would fall under the community meetings, but in that situation, I think what has to happen is that you have to be there more as kind of in the role as community members. You can't be up there leading the discussion or interacting. Just kind of be there listening more.
So I think what we did was we ended up calling it a special meeting and then allowing folks to have time for public comment, which was kind of weird because we were there to listen to the public comment.
Okay.
But I think we kind of that's kind of how we dealt with it.
That's even better to do out of abundance of caution. If you are concerned that it could turn into a meeting or any commissioners do want to interact and respond, schedule it as a meeting, you know, agendize it and make it an official special meeting, and then have everyone, and then all the commissioners can interact and respond and participate a little more. It's probably the best way to do it. But if it is just this is a community meeting and all of you are there, then it's just, we're just here to listen and as a just general member of the public, not lead and interact. Because you're going to lead and interact, then it becomes an official meeting of the commission. All right, so now getting into more cut and dry, just the basic format of the meetings, agenda items. Now, all of you will recognize this because this is how we do it each week, or each month. But first step, the chair will announce the agenda item, clearly state the subject. Second step, the chair will invite a presentation by the staff, or of the staff report on the item, including any recommendation. Third step will be that the chair asks the commissioners if they have any questions on the item for clarification. Then the chair will invite public comment on the item. Public comments can be limited. That's usually not an issue here. You know, they do that at city council just because they have so many people commenting, and efficiency and time's sake, they might be there until the morning if they let everyone speak as long as they wanted to. At the end of the public comments, the chair should announce the public input has concluded. So you'll notice that it's a public comment period is ended, and then it comes back to the commission. Next step will be that the chair invites a motion on the an item and announces the name of the commissioner making the motion, and then there needs to be a second on the motion, and announce the commissioner who seconds the motion. And then after the motion is made and seconded, it's repeated out to the secretary, make sure everyone's on the same page. Then the chair will invite discussion of the motion, and then that's where all of the commissioners get to provide their input, ask their questions, discussion can occur on the item. And then once all of the discussion is concluded on it, then there will be a vote on the item. The chair will ask for the vote, yes, no, or abstain. In this situation, we typically don't have abstentions. If you do have to abstain from an item because, well, really the only reason we allow abstentions is if you have a conflict of interest with the item. And typically your conflict of interest would only be if you have kind of a financial benefit in the matter, or if it's, I don't know if it applies as much with this commission, but if there was a project that was going to be, within 500 feet of a property you own or where you live, then you might have to abstain from the item just because you might have a conflict there. But in that situation, you would actually do that prior to the item being brought up. So when we first get to that item on the agenda and the chair first announces, okay, we're moving on to this item, that's when you would kind of step in and say, okay, I'm actually going to abstain from this item because, And then pursuant to Brown Act, you have to state the reason for or why you're going to recuse yourself and abstain from the item. But you would do that up front, not at the time of voting. And then if that happens, then you're supposed to leave the dais and step aside, because you're not supposed to be able to influence anyone on the item. Again, I can't even recall if we've had a situation like that on this commission, just because the type of items that are brought forward to the commission don't usually kind of create those kinds of problems. But if there's any questions or concerns ever, let me know, and I can discuss them with you, and we can determine whether or not there's a conflict where you'd have to recuse yourself. After the vote is taken, then the chair announces the result of the vote and what action, if any, the commission has taken. Now there's two, these are pretty technical items, so I'll just kind of go through them quickly, and I'll just give a general description of them. But technically, motions can be amended prior to voting on them. So if somebody makes a motion saying, I recommend that we do A, B, and C, and then some discussion starts on it, and then somebody says, I actually kind of want to amend that a little bit. I make a motion to amend to say we're going to do A, B, C, and D. I just want to tweak it a little bit. And then what you need to have happen is that somebody would then need to second the amended motion, and then if you get a second on the amended motion, that becomes the new motion that's on the floor. And you go through that one, there's a vote taken on that. If the amended motion fails, then you go back to your original motion. Again, this is pretty technical stuff that I don't think we've had come up here. We're pretty informal with stuff, so we can usually get through that, but it's one of the tools under the Brown Act. There's also motions to reconsider. This comes up, you see them every once in a while at council meetings. Something will happen for whatever reason, some new information comes up, maybe a council member who had stepped out wants to come back, and if for whatever reason they want to go back and reconsider an item that had already been voted on. So that can be done. It's a little more specific and technical on how you can do that, because it has to be one of the people who approved the motion has to make the motion to reconsider. So it can't be somebody who lost the motion and is just upset and they really want to do it again. It's not an appeal right. It has to be somebody who approved it, kind of saying, wait, I kind of want to step back from that and possibly go a different direction now. Once again, I've never seen that come up in this commission, but if we ever do get to that position, it's a tool that we have. So you can always, maybe think about it and say, hey, wait, I want to go back and change that. We can reconsider that, right? And you can ask me about it, and I'll walk you through it. Public participation. Again, the Brown Act does require two types of public comment periods during the meetings. Not every item gets a public comment period on its own, but certain items do, where it's your public hearing items get their own public hearing section within that item. But then there's also a public comment period at the end of the agenda where the public can come up and really comment on whatever they want. It doesn't have to be on the agenda, it can be anything. We ask that they keep it related to arts and culture for this commission, but really you can say whatever they please. Discussions on non-agenda items are limited. So that for you as commissioners, you are only supposed to be responding to, discussing the items that are on the agenda. So if something else comes up, either through public comments or just the discussion on one item all of a sudden starts leading someplace else, and then it's like, oh yeah, I remember there's this other thing, it's kind of, raised an idea in my head, I want to talk about that. You can't talk about that if it's not on the agenda. These are the limited exceptions. So you may briefly respond to a public comment or question and provide a referral to staff or other resources. So if somebody is asking, like in their public comment, asking about, hey, what about this item? Wasn't on the agenda. You can say, well, if it's a quick answer, you might say, oh, that's coming up on a certain date. Or if it needs further explanation, you can say, please refer to staff for further discussion. But we can't open it up as a discussion among the commission. You can also ask questions like and this happens during commissioner comment time. oftentimes you'll ask questions on certain items, and staff can provide answers or quick updates. But if there needs to be a full discussion where the commissioners start interacting, it would need to be agendized for a future meeting. And of course, the commissioners may report your own activities during your commissioner comment times, and you can also request staff to report back on matters that might not necessarily be on the agenda. Courtesy and decorum, again, you guys are great at this, but it's that kind of Robert's Rules, parliamentary procedure kind of concept of just one person speaking at a time. The chair recognizing each speaker, so don't just jump in, let the chair acknowledge who should speak next. Discussion has to focus on the agenda item. No kind of comments about personalities or any personal issues. And the chair does have the right to cut off the discussion that might get out of control. Once again, never seen it here, don't expect it to ever happen here, but it can happen, and it has happened at other commissions and whatnot.
Is that the right to cut off other commissioners or
Yes.
the public as well?
Both. It has to be pretty extreme to cut off the public, but if somebody gets up and it wouldn't even necessarily be the chair, it is the chair's responsibility, but if somebody in the public was getting to a point where they were being threatening or vulgar in any way, staff, as council, we can step in as well to help with that, because while it is public comment time and they have their First Amendment rights, there are limits. You cannot be yelling at anyone. You cannot be threatening people. I shouldn't say yelling. People do have a right to yell, to raise their voice, but you cannot be threatening in any way. And so if we feel that somebody's crossing the line, we can certainly cut off the public. Much more leeway amongst your commissioners. Any kind of what you perceive as personal attacks, you can cut somebody off and say, let's get back on topic. Just talk about the issues. Don't talk about the individual commissioners and those kinds of things. Maintaining civility in meetings, do not attack or question the motives of other members, limit misunderstandings, get the facts, use fair process, listen with an open mind, and focus the discussion on the agenda item. Again, these are all things you're doing a great job with, so don't have to worry about any of that. Some pointers and tips, these aren't necessarily rules or anything, but it's kind of helpful. Try not to engage in two-way dialogue with the audience. That one doesn't apply as much here because when I started off, I was kind of saying, this is much more informal of a commission. We try to encourage more open discussion and dialogue. So if somebody does come up and has comment, you want to ask questions, and there's much more dialogue here. You'll see that more at the city council level where somebody comes up and it might be saying something they don't agree with to a council member. You don't see the council members respond back too often. They just give the person their time to make their comment, and that's it. They don't need to respond back, and it's best if they don't because it usually just escalates things if people start going back and forth. Preparing in advance of the meetings is very helpful for everyone. Just review the agendas and the staff reports, and if you have any specific questions or concerns or issues, getting your questions to staff prior to the meeting as early as possible is very helpful. But of course, if it's something that comes up during the meeting, feel free to, ask any one of us at any time. Don't hold back. Even during the meetings, it's best to get your questions answered and make sure that you're understanding what's being presented. And thank you. Enjoy your time as commissioner, and you're providing valuable service to the city. So, any additional questions? Okay. I guess that's a good sign.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On that note, does the public have any comments they wish to share with the commission? I know. Okay, does the staff have any comments they wish to share with the commission?
Yes. Just three.
One of which I have, one of which you've already heard. But the first comment, first update would be the Investing in the Artist Grant panel met yesterday, and they gave their recommendations for the grantees and awarded funding. staff will present the report at the next commissioner meeting. Excuse me. For your ratification to go to City Council. And second update is the final community listening session is tomorrow, Ward 3, at Salgado Center in Rosita Park. So hopefully we'll get one last push out to hear, although it's been really good, but yeah, we're learning from these community sessions, not just what the community wants, but also how to hold them, where to hold them, when to hold them, as we noticed, the number of people who attend. And then finally, the first HeartLink workshop will be coming up Sunday, June 30th, at the end of this month, from 5 to 8. Please let me know if you'd like to visit the workshop so I can set that up with the facility. So if you want to witness, how they're conducted and all that with the homeless individuals. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, so commission members, please note that no member may speak more than once until all have had an opportunity to speak. Also, the commission may vote to limit our comment to 3 minutes each if we feel the need. Commissioner Garcia, any comments?
No, the only comment, I hope to see you at the Rosita Park for the listening session, and I'll be there to listen. Thank you.
Commissioner Oliva? No comment. Commissioner Oliver? Commissioner Sierra?
No comments.
Okay. I have actually one comment, which I think kind of piggybacks on what we were talking about during the training, the mural policy ordinance ad hoc committee. I know that the involving the commissioners kind of fizzled out. I don't know if there's any way that we can kind of revive that, or pass the ball to staff, because again, I do think that it's an important step for the city to take to create some sort of an ordinance. So maybe we can look into that for the next meeting, or I don't really know how we can address that.
So Ryan, is this where, when you had mentioned, would this be something that Commissioner Cha would then bring to Mayor Pro Tem Villegas, who appointed her, and go that route? Is that how that would work?
Yeah, it's certainly something to bring up to your council member who appointed you, and then they can discuss it up at that level to bring back around. But I know this is something that has been dealt with by staff as well. So we can look into the kind of desire to bring an ordinance like that forward by kind of coming back around the other direction as well, and checking in with Stephen and seeing if he can get the ear of the city manager, because obviously we have new city manager since that time, so we can see what the direction might be for that type of ordinance. But we can kind of both come at it from different directions and see what the desire is to proceed forward with that type of an ordinance.
Because I do recall that you had found something. I don't know if it was a public art. There was something that was almost in a completed form, and I don't know if I ever really got a chance to look through it on an in-depth basis. But I want to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel. So that would just be my only comment, substantive comment. And then one last time? No? Okay. All right. Well, then this meeting is adjourned, and our next regular meeting is scheduled for July 18th. Thank you.